own survivability, it is critical that on the agenda of climate action, in order to with what is happening as a result of climate change, that people hear what we have to say, what we are feeling, and how we believe we can be positively saved as a result of their support for what we are requesting. And so you're right, the CBI, there was a time when we led. We went around the world promoting it, in the Middle East, all over. And then, of course, other countries followed. And then there was need for change to be made to the program. And again, St. Kitts and Nevis sat down with partners in the Eastern Caribbean in particular, and had a memorandum of agreement as to how the program should progress, especially since we all agree that we need the program for our own sustenance and economic development. The same thing happens with the climate action and climate change. Dr. Clark, very much foremost, very much frontal, very much capable in the international arena, has basically had the full support of our government in bringing to this country a number of global partners who would not only see what we are seeking to do as a country, but would be able to lend their own support for us to have the necessary action and relief from the changes of climate action, of climate, the deterioration that we are seeing here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So, again, you mentioned the Global Fund. If we are going to successfully prepare for support for the changes that are going to be required, we need funding. And that is why bringing partners here who are engaged in the climate fund, that's going to be important, because funding is going to be critical. So I think it all comes together, mainly because we have players who are in the government, who are making outreach to the international community, individuals, organizations, and countries, so that we can be brought on board in their own deliberations, whether in their own countries or in international fora or theaters, wherever they are in the world, so that St. Kitts and Nevis continues to be a focus of attention. We need to do that. That's what the foreign policy is doing, making sure that our voice is heard and we are present as well across the different theaters of the world.
And of course, by seeing the developments here in St. Kitts and Nevis, when you visit, you're able to get an appreciation for, as you mentioned, how climate change is impacting us as a small and developing state, but also the tremendous potential. Of course, geothermal was one of the areas that was showcased during the Green Climate Fund when they had their meeting here. A special invitation was extended to the head of the GCF, who went to Nevis. And GCIS also is going to have that focus as well too on geothermal, which is something that is very impactful. How do you think, Dr. Douglas, having all of this type of exposure to what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis and the talents that are here would help to impact the national development agenda, and also will extend to all people living in the diaspora and here in the country?
The national development agenda is to ensure that our people survive despite the challenges that we face outside. How can we survive? We're talking about energy security. If we do not transition from our dependence on fossil fuel, we will be left behind. Therefore, it is important, Rawlins and those guys, when they were there planning the development of the country, looking to ensure that water is there. We dropped the ball there, and now we have to pick up the ball, because you can't get really to where you want to go to food security unless you have water.
That's right.
So we must have water. But water, groundwater, needs to come up, one. Two, if it is not coming up, you have to desalinate. All that requires energy. That's why the transitioning from fossil fuel energy, which is enormously expensive, to something that is cheaper and much more sustainable. So water becomes critical, energy becomes critical, food security becomes critical. We are now being challenged. You see what is happening with regard to the increases in possible prices.
Yes, inflation, yes.
Inflation, the tariffs that are being imposed and so forth. It means then that we have to really begin to eat what we grow and grow what we eat and export the balance if we have excess. So this is why I believe that, again, the foreign policy is geared towards attaining these specific objectives that we have set for ourselves in our development strategy and plan for St. Kitts and Nevis. They all come together to make sure that they are all properly financed, properly resourced, and properly planned for in terms of the preparation of the human resource. We don't want to bring guys from Saudi Arabia to help us with our geothermal, or from the UAE. We want to be able for our young trained minds as engineers to develop the capacity. So it all goes hand in hand. As we plan for our development, we plan for the education of our brilliant young people who we know can do it. And so they are also included in the future plans for going forward.
And of course, that is something that persons from St. Kitts and Nevis have been known for, to excel in wherever area that they carve out in the international arena. I believe the term that is used is when they find their niche, they're able to excel in different areas. And that actually leads to my next question. So where St. Kitts and Nevis is pursuing a bid for representation on the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Now, that council is one of the 6 principal organs of the UN and is responsible for coordinating the organization's work on economic and social issues. Can you tell us about this?
Right. The Economic and Social Council is critically important at the level of the United Nations. I believe it attracts maybe as many as more than 50 or so members. And every rotation, you tend to have about 18 persons elected. Why do we wish to be there? Again, the world must hear us. If we identify our challenges, the world must also hear us in terms of what we think are the possible solutions. And this council meets on a regular basis to look at, to plan the agenda for ongoing meetings that the UN will coordinate within the area that we are looking at, social, economic, and support development. Sitting on that council gives us the opportunity to help to set the agenda of those meetings. The agenda, therefore, must include some of the challenges that we are facing. We being considered a progressive small island developing state. Progressive. We have a high per capita income. So we are considered a little richer than other countries. But at the same time, we are small and we are vulnerable. One hurricane can destroy what we think is a preeminent economic position among our states. So we want to be there so that we can be part of the planning of the agenda and also speak in those meetings to the agenda items that would ensure that our development is sustained in the years to come. And so we are asking the international community at the level of the United Nations to vote for us. Mind you, we've been there before. We might have gotten there back in 2009, and again we repeated our position there. We've slipped, now we are trying to get back on. Because if we are going to really impact the world and enthuse our own people and persons who are supporting our development, it is important that we sit at the table of those who are not only planning the agenda, but those who are finding the solutions according to the items on the agenda.
And of course, as we speak about, the international voice of St. Kitts and Nevis resonating once again, it's the importance of having this appointment. What strategies are being used? I imagine that there'll be sideline meetings, there'll be lobbying, there'll be, of course, support from CARICOM. I remember during the COFCO meeting here last week that there was a discussion about having someone appointed on the OAS Council. The region successfully was able to engage and get that person appointed. So I imagine we'll be using strategies such as that.
Of course. We want to make sure that the collective, united force of CARICOM is always there. You just mentioned it. For the first time, I think, in a long time, the Caribbean countries, the CARICOM countries, members of the OAS, stuck together. We chose a Caribbean candidate, Suriname, sorry. Yeah. And at first, some of our own did not think we could do it. But as we went along, we said we are supporting our own. After all, we are a body in the OAS. Yes, it's a large group, but we believe that if persons were not successful in splintering our vote, all votes go immediately to Suriname, which is exactly what happened. A unified front brought results for the first time in the history of the OAS. It has been led by a Caribbean person, a CARICOM person out of Suriname. Mr. Ramden, fully experienced, has been foreign minister, was in fact Assistant Secretary General before, was foreign minister, got elected, and now he takes up his seat in a few weeks' time as the Secretary General of the Organization of American States. So what it means really is that we have to leverage our numbers. We have to show we are a united group when it comes to critical matters of placing our people in the right place at the right time. Right. And that is really what the basic philosophy is in terms of St. Kitts and Nevis supporting CARICOM and ensuring that we are at one voice on these matters.
And of course, we can expect that same support for the UN.
With regard to what we are asking, is the same thing.
Right.
Recently, last week, as you mentioned, the CARICOM colleagues were here, chairmanship of the Council for Foreign Relations shifted to us from Dominica, and we went through an item on the agenda, candidatures. We looked at all of the forums around the world where candidates are to be elected at sometime this year, a few months' time, and up to maybe the next few years. And we said, we are going for this, and we will have the full support of CARICOM. It's only a matter of time, and we will see what happens. That is how we do it. We lend support, and when we ask for support, we expect to get support.
Right. And of course, as mentioned, we're going to touch on COFCO a bit later on in our program, but I have to ask Dr. Douglas, as we speak about positioning our persons in the diaspora and locally here to go out and to give their international contribution, what about the persons who work within the ministry itself now? Of course, there's a growing list of diplomatic allies and increasing diplomatic engagements that takes place around the world. I recall Minister Clark, of course, as we mentioned, GCIS, it was held for the first time last year in Prince Edward Island, and so there are these new engagements that are popping up. So how can we ensure, or should I say, what strategies is the ministry putting in place to ensure that staff development is enhanced at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that includes at the junior level and also the executive level?
Good. We insist that we must have persons out there in our various consulates and embassies who are experienced and who are trainable and trained. Once we would have achieved putting key people in different theaters around the world, the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, UAE. We then make sure that opportunities for training of that supplemental staff is ongoing. We make it our business as we sit with countries from time to time who come to visit us, like later this afternoon, I'll be meeting the Italian representative of the Italian government. Training. One of the first things that we discuss, training. Mainly because training is expensive. We don't have the capacity to do a lot of it ourselves, so we ask second, third country to assist us. So training is critical, training of our staff. We not only encourage our people to go on training overseas, on courses, long-term courses, maybe bachelor's, master's, etc. But short-term courses also, we invite our people, our employees within the ministry to get that training. Encourage them to do, even here at CFBC, we encourage them to get themselves up to speed. We have them attached to different embassies of St. Kitts and Nevis outside. We rotate the members of staff in our various embassies. Maybe 3 years, you rotate, or shorter periods, we move accordingly. So a lot of it depends on our own training that we initiate at the national level, paid for by our government. But also we invite our counterparts around the world to provide us with those opportunities. Training is critical. One of the things that we always ask for when a country comes to ask us for some form of support, we said we need our training to be expanded. We need greater capacity of trained people. Provide us some scholarships for that to happen.
And the scholarships don't just extend, of course, to the ministry staff, but also generally for persons from St. Kitts and Nevis to apply for scholarships to pursue greater academic goals, of course. Scholarships for education in different areas.
Different disciplines in the country. Taiwan provides so many scholarships. Scholarships not only for people who are working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but throughout the wide spectrum of providing the necessary human resource, trained human resource that we require to move our country forward.
Right. Okay. Now, Dr. Douglas, of course, you would have accompanied our Prime Minister, the Honorable, Dr. Terence Drew, to recent engagement in the United States with the Secretary of State. We're going to touch on that a bit more, but we're going to take our first break.
Thank you.
Stay with us, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
Honorable Minister Douglas, you are assuming the chairmanship of this council at a time of increasing uncertainty and global challenges. We look forward to your leadership.
We are in very interesting times. Right, Honorable Dr. Douglas? I'm very happy to vacate the chair so that you can take it. I wish I was serving after you because I know that there's a lot you still have to teach us. Your experience, your seniority, of course, as a former Prime Minister of long standing, we know that you will be able to steer us in these very challenging times, very difficult times.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Senior Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, on foreign policy and global engagements and how it's impacting us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, having a very local impact here on our people. So, as we mentioned, Senior Minister, let's turn our attention now to St. Kitts and Nevis's engagement with traditional partners. Now, interestingly, we've seen new leaders elected in the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he was elected in July 2024. The United States in November similarly had an election, and we saw the inauguration of President Donald Trump in January 2025. Of course, this would be his second stint as president of that country. And in Canada, Mark Carney became prime minister just last month. How have these changes impacted foreign policy with these countries, our foreign policy with these countries?
I think it has given us, these changes, I should say, have given us the opportunity to re-examine exactly where we are with our foreign policy. The UK election that brought the new Prime Minister into being, coming from the Labour Party, to some extent, that was clearly expected. The return of President Trump at one time was not expected, and then it became clear that he could upset the apple cart, and that has happened. And Canada